But every year I usually just go through year by year some of the how history.
I'm filming this.
How the history of cinema progresses. Now I changed it a little bit this year to be a bit more brief in its creation and to include more significant. And that would require me to talk about more significant points rather than just talking about movies that are really famous or have made lots of money, because well, that's all fine and dandy. I wanted to make this more about the history of cinema and not necessarily just everything year by year. So this is my final cinema presentation, and I said cue Ave Maria because even though it's not my final presentation, this is like the final of the series. Yeah.
Which one? Which Ave Maria? Like the Mozart or?
I think the opera, the one that they do, the one they use in Gravity Falls.
Okay.
Then the sock puppets getting blown up.
Wait, what about sock?
First, I'd like to thank the Academy.
I can't speak. I must.
I'd like to thank all of you. All right, now I label.
One sec. Can I make a suggestion that we turn off one light so it'll come up better on the camera?
Okay. All right. So this is I like to label the different decades in movie history. They're not really like movies, various eras in movie history. I just think naming the decades is somewhat fun. So I said the pre-1890s is one small step for me, because a lot of interesting things happen. And the first thing is that, so I believe in 1878, a man named Edward Moy went up to a Californian governor named Leland Stanford and said, hey, you made this bet with another guy that a horse picks its legs up off the ground when it runs. And Leland Stanford says, yes, can you prove that for me? And so what Edward Muybridge did was set up 16 cameras along a race a jockeying track. And as the horse was running by, they hit tripwires that set the cameras off. So as you can see, the horse it shows a horse in motion. Now this is a later one, because it shows a horse standing still. So this was a much shorter form of his invention. He dubbed it the zoopraxiscope. But Leland Stanford lost the bet because he said that the horse did not take all of its legs off the ground, but obviously it did. And then he toured Europe with his zoopraxiscope, and then he became outclassed by later inventions by Thomas Edison, the Lumiere brothers, and the eventual invention of film as an industry. But in 1888, Edison filed a patent for his kinetoscope. Now this is important because this is one of the first devices specifically used for filming, for capturing motion pictures. The Kodak camera also came into usage. So George Eastman, the patented the Kodak camera and started taking the first pictures with it. Started taking pictures with a more handheld camera beside, in contrast with some of the more bulky and harder to use cameras. And then the oldest film ever known at the moment was captured by a man named was captured in 1888, the same year as the patent for the kinetoscope was filed, by a man named Louis Le Prince. And he filmed, he made a very, very short, grainy film called Roundhay Garden Scene. I forget what it depicted, but I'm pretty sure it was just, usually, a lot of the more initial films, the first films, were just depicting what they said. So there's one where it's a train arriving at a station, and that's just a train arriving at a station. Now, in 1889, some of the first film was created by a man named Harry Reichenbach. You can see here, and that was one of the predecessors to traditional, well, not traditional, but some to later celluloid film that would be used for film projectors. And now we get to 1890, and I said 1890 is one giant leap for entertainment because this was the decade, in my opinion, in which some of people like Thomas Edison primarily, and others began to become more engrossed in the process of filmmaking. And so in 1890, Edison had previously filed a patent for the kinetoscope, but that was when he actually built it, and he filmed one of his first movies, Monkey Shines #1. I forget why Monkey Shines was dubbed it, but it's a weird name. And right here, this is a frame from it. This was a lab assistant right here, and as you can see, it is the most high quality HD thing you'll ever witness. I'm just kidding, it's horrible. And then he also, in 1893, he built the first film studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and nicknamed it the Black Maria because it was covered in tar paper. And Black Maria at the time was a nickname for a police car. He also made sure to show his kinetograph at the Chicago Exhibition. So the Chicago Exhibition was the Chicago World Fair at the time. It was very, very, it hosted a lot of new inventions, like the Ferris wheel was invented there. But it was also where Mr. Edison showed off his kinetograph. This is the Black Maria, by the way. It was later removed, and Thomas Edison built a bigger and more technologically advanced film studio in its place. Now, in 1894, a kinetoscope parlor, which was, this was a kinetoscope which you would look into and you could see a small motion picture within it. A kinetoscope parlor opened up on Broadway in New York, and this was sort of a predecessor to traditional theaters. It was just a parlor where you'd go in and you'd look and you'd see small motion pictures. 1894 was also the year in which we saw the first color-tinted film come into play, which was called Annabelle Butterfly Dance. I have not seen it, but because it is not available on YouTube. In 1895, one of Thomas Edison's sort of, and Thomas Edison had a lot of enemies. I'm not going to list them all. But the Lumiere brothers first tested their cinematograph, which was another early form of the film. They were a very popular European film organization. And there was also, but the first formal film company in 1895 was also founded, called the American Mutoscope Company, which made decent films, I guess. None of these films are very decent.
By our standards?
Ironically, by our standards, that is true. Although I do love the train arriving at the station because it's so unnecessary. But 1895 was also a good year in that it had the first special effect, which was the execution of Mary in the movie Execution of Mary, Queen of Scots.
Sorry.
How long is this
It was
movie?
also when the train arriving at the station debuted at La Salon Indienne, which is when the first movie was shot onto a screen by the Lumiere brothers. And apparently the audience was startled by the train coming through the station. That's just a rumor, though, that people have exploited many times, but it could be true, could not.
How long was the movie of the execution of Mary, whatever it was called?
No movies were over 5 minutes. So, well, some of them were. I know that some of the longer ones were a bit longer, but let's say Monkey Shines #1. That's only like less than a minute. So all of them are very short.
By our standards.
Hosted the first film exhibition in Asia at Watson's Hotel, and Edison built the first permanent. Well, it was supposed to be permanent, but I believe it was later removed. The first permanent movie theater called the Edisonia Vitascope Theater. And then one of my favorites, Georges Méliès, he came into began to make his first. Ryan, where are you going?
I have to go see a teacher about it. I might be back, depending on how fast.
That hurts. Georges Méliès made his first film, and he also made a film called The Devil's Castle. Well, that's translated into English. And the reason that film is significant is because it was a predecessor to horror films. It was not explicitly meant to be a scary film, but that's what it was. It is what a lot of later horror films would look back on as being the first. In 1897, Méliès made the first studio with artificial illumination, and I wanted to know throughout most of the 1890s and 1900s, early 1900s, 1910, is that Edison is a brat and likes to file lawsuits against people who he thinks are stealing his inventions or are stealing his ideas. So throughout all of this, just realize that Edison's film company is just trying to annoy people. Eventually, he loses a massive lawsuit and his company loses power in the film industry. But anyways, and then came in 1899, just at the turn of the century, Méliès, one of the greatest film directors of all time, made the first fantasy narrative with Cinderella. So he made it was called Cendrillon at the time. But he made the first sort of a movie with fantastic themes. And we move on to the 1900s, where movies start becoming popular, but the 1900s is more important, in my opinion, for the precedents it set for later films. So let's say, in 1900, the first Sherlock first appeared on screen. In 1902, Fun in the Bakery Shop came out. This was a predecessor to cartoons. This is probably one of my favorite old films because it's basically this guy throws dough at a rat on a barrel, and he begins creating faces out of the dough he throws onto the barrel.
That's awesome.
1902 also came with A Trip to the Moon. This is one of the most iconic early film images. Who hasn't seen it? This was Georges Méliès. He made it. It had 30 scenes and a great musical score. It was one of the first. It is credited to be and also a predecessor for sci-fi. In 1903, Hollywood became a municipality. That was just saying that Hollywood became a municipality.
1 second.
No film organizations were there yet, or any of that.
Could you film?
It was also saw the creation of the Great Train Robbery, which was in some form or another a predecessor to most westerns. And then in 1904 came the first remake, where someone just said, you know what, 1 year after the Great Train Robbery was made, it's probably a good idea to make it again. So someone made The Great Train Robbery the following year. Now, in 1905, the Warner Brothers, which would eventually become one of the Big Five, which is one of the Big Five implies one of the biggest movie producers, they opened their first theater. And in 1906, the first animated movie came into play with it was called Humorous Faces of Funny Faces. So it just showed shifting faces that were funny. They weren't funny at all. And in 1908, Florence Lawrence, who is credited as being the first movie star, began acting. She was paid a $25 salary an hour. Compared to today's standards, that's not a lot, but at the time, a $25 salary an hour is a bit. There were about 8,000.
What year was this? What year was this that she got that for salary?
I have no idea.
All right.
I know that's not beneficial, but I recall reading it yesterday and then I forgot. It's not in my notes. And then there were about 8,000 theaters by 1908 in the U.S. And then the first horror film also came into being, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in 1808. It was, my honest opinion on it is that it's not very scary.
But back then,
I suppose that's my beliefs. And in 1909, the New York Times was the first to coin the term star. So they called Florence Lawrence a star. So now we have, that is a very prevalent term to name people who are very big in the movie industry. And it should be noted that it was the New York Times that initially coined that phrase. Now, it was in 1910 that I call it a gain in popularity because irregardless of